All right.
Boom! What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. Very excited to be talking about who gets what and why, what's the future, and why it's up to us, and so much more. We have Coin, the Oracle of Silicon Valley, joining us. Tim O'Reilly. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for that introduction.
Thanks for coming on to the show. Tim O'Reilly is so awesome. We are so grateful to have you here. Tim O'Reilly's been 40 years in Silicon Valley doing all different types of work with O'Reilly Media, his company, everything from conference producing to book publishing, investing, wrestling with the hardest questions: who gets what and why, what's the future, why it's up to us. I'm so grateful that you came onto our show. Thank you, Tim.
Well, thanks for having me. Now, I should say that this phrase that I've been using a lot in my talks lately, who gets what and why, is actually the title of someone else's book. Al Roth, who won a Nobel Prize in economics for market design, is really somebody who's given me a tool, and I think of ideas as tools for thinking, that has really helped shape the way that I'm looking at our current world, in which we used to think that there was this free market that helped determine who gets what and why. But we've increasingly moved into a world where there are algorithms designed by companies that are shaping the choices we make. And really, the design of markets is this new field. You know, because when people talk about the market as if it's one thing. But in fact, we're now in markets that are shaped and designed by, for example, people at Facebook, people at Google, people on Wall Street. And in fact, many of the great political battles are battles to shape the rules of markets. And those markets are fundamentally mechanisms for allocation. And what Al's work did that's so important was he demonstrated that you can actually intervene in markets and make them work better. So he got his prize for working on markets where money is not a factor. So kidney transplant marketplaces. You know, I mean, if you know, it's pretty hard. You have to get a person who needs one, a person who has one to give at the same time. They have to have matching blood types. There's all these complicated factors. And he said, well, if we can increase trust in the market that I can give you a kidney today, and I'll get one for the person that I love, who I'm not a match for later, you know, you can actually create longer chains. You know, so, you know, here was and he looked at a bunch of mechanisms for how do you change the trust dynamics in this, you know, pretty major thing that people would do in their lives that has, you know, literally life-changing benefits. He also looked at things like college admissions, law clerks matching up with judges, and you know, how these markets can go awry. And so in my book, one of the things that I tried to look at was the evolution of algorithmic marketplaces. And I've continued to think about that since I published it. And you know, you can kind of see when they go right, how they can be this incredibly powerful tool that helps us manage things at enormous scale and speed. You think about Google, you know, literally having us search across trillions of web pages and find, you know, more or less what we want. You think about Amazon, where they've got 600 million products, SKUs, you know, and this is a store of an unbelievable scale. You could not do it. But we can also see how it goes wrong. You know, Facebook was like, hey, we'll just show people more of what they respond to and get engaged with. And that went badly wrong. It was gameable. And so clearly there's a market design problem which they're wrestling with today. And of course in my book I kind of go through that sequence, and then I try to make the case, and yes, our economy is also one of those today, one of those vast algorithmic systems with designers and with rules that may not be the best rules and that can go wrong. And make the allocations that seem, well, they're just the market. That's just the way the market works. And what we have to understand is the market is a human artifact designed with rules that favor some people over others. And the whole game of politics is around shaping those power dynamics and those rules. And so ultimately, I guess a lot of what I've gotten obsessed with over the last 5, 6 years is taking the lessons that I've learned in my career in technology and saying, oh, how are they playing out today in our society?
Okay, Tim, as you can obviously tell, has such a wealth of knowledge that he's just giving us this massive picture. And I love it, and I want to try and dive into this through Tim's eyes. Tim has been here from the even pre-dot-com days, doing book publishing of things like this open catalog of all of the World Wide Web, all the way to doing the .com, doing Web 2.0, doing the mobile social, doing the open source movement, actually proliferating that as a common phrase around the world and inspiring people with that. Now going through this transition with Internet of Things and with data and being right here at the cutting edge, again, teaching it to people around the world. And so not only have you been here doing that for 40 years, but now you're painting out this really beautiful picture, which you write about in your book. I highly, highly recommend reading What's the Future. Please, please check that out. The link's in the bio. Read it, read it, read it, share it with people. And let's unpack this now. You gave us a couple thoughts here. One of them is this algorithms. So algorithms, let's say 40 years ago, were much less involved in the way that we see information, in the way that it influences political elections, all this type of stuff. And now the couple handfuls of people that control the way that 2 billion human animals see what happens on YouTube or what happens on any of Tencent's platforms or across the world, this is becoming more and more of a, do we come in with a regulation? As you said, are there ways to come in with regulations that make the markets better? And that's a very interesting point that I think we'll end up getting to. But I think the most important principle here is that there has been a tremendous amount over the last 40 years of wealth concentration that has occurred for the benefit of the 1%ers. And meanwhile, the median income people and the low SES people have had a stagnation where me and a lot of the other millennials and Gen Z, as you're very familiar with children, have, what do we have? We have a life outcome that is projected to be worse than our parents. And this is, and this may be supplemented by things like having a new strategy, a Capitalism 2.0, one that does things slightly differently. And so this is where this conversation comes into play. What is the future?
Yeah, well, the key part of the title actually came from my wife, Jen Palka, who's the founder of a nonprofit called Code for America. And I said, well, the book will be called WTF, What's the Future? And she said, no, it should be What's the Future and Why It's Up to Us. Because that idea that the future is something that we shape is very central. In fact, it is a designed thing. Now again, there's a lot of contingencies and a lot that can surprise us, but so many parts of it are shaped by decisions that humans make. And so the idea that we have to understand better what are some of the dynamics that you talk about and make better choices, I think is central to my thinking. So let me just expand a little bit on this idea of inequality by kind of going back to the notion of algorithmic systems and what we learn from Google and Facebook and other systems. And that is that these systems typically have what you could call an optimization function, often referred to as an objective function. In the book, I actually refer to it as the fitness function because of it gives you a neat tie to a field of evolutionary biology, and this idea of fitness landscapes. But there's this thing that you're trying to optimize for. And of course, what fitness landscapes remind us of is that you can have a fitness peak that is not actually the highest peak, and you can only get off that peak by going down into the valley to get up to another peak. So that's why history often has these peaks and valleys, because you can't get to you can see this better future, but you can't get there simply by continuing up and to the right, which is why the Silicon Valley millennial fantasy of the singularity, I think, is so wrong. Is that, yeah, it smooths out all the curves, and that's not how it actually happens. Yes, even if you believe that there is long-term progress, there can be steep valleys in between the next increment of progress. At least you like to say to Ray Kurzweil, you do know that the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul was the largest building in the world for 1,000 years. That's a long time to have a body of knowledge, to lose it, and then to only slowly gain it back. And so I think that I'm sorry, I'm backing up a little bit. So this optimization function, when we look at this, all this worrying about the 1% wealth inequality, that was something we designed into our economy starting in about the late 70s, early 80s. Because if I look in my book, I'm not really only an amateur historian, but I look at some economic turning points. And if you look at this, we had in the 20s, we had this sort of, also this massive inequality, which eventually led to a Great Depression, World War, Great Depression. Things got pretty bad. And in particular, they made a set of choices after the First World War, which was, the victors punished the losers. They did not treat the returning veterans well. And so then you have this wonderful example after World War II, where the US in particular made better choices. They basically said, "Ooh, wrong idea. We're not going to punish the losers. We're going to build them up." You have the Marshall Plan. You have, really the rebuilding of Europe, and not just the rebuilding of our allies, the rebuilding of our former enemies. And you also had this, basically embrace as the fundamental optimization function of the economy, full employment. You had, things like the GI Bill. You had, money, returning veterans. We got to get them either to go to school, start a business, we buy a house. The government had this intervention, and really the objective function of the economy was full employment, because they remembered what happened after the First World War. And then, as often happens, you have an objective function and it runs its course. It does the thing that it was trying to do, and people just don't adapt fast enough. The road's kind of winding and they keep going in the straight line. So then we said, well, this has led to inflation. We have this big problem. We need to actually have a different objective function. They picked one which was corporate profits. And guess what? It actually did make the economy better for a while. It cracked the back of inflation. Things were pretty good for a while. But then it ran its course, and it was like, holy cow, this is like this, and anyway.
Where do we value humans now?
That's right. And now we're kind of coming up for way too late for a big reevaluation. So in my book, I kind of make the analogy, and again, I'm kind of going back and forth between these technological systems that we're dealing with and what I've learned from them, and then looking at things like the economy. But across both of them, you have this wonderful mythology that matches both of those patterns, and that is the story of genies from Arabian mythology. You get three wishes. You always know they go wrong, right? You ask for something, it's what you think you want, but what you get is what you asked for, not what you actually wanted. And like Facebook is such a great example of that, and it's such a way to see, oh yeah, we can design a system with the best of intentions. And again, maybe a lot of people like to rag on Facebook and go, oh, they were really a bad actor. No, I think they were. I've spent a lot of time with Mark, and I think they were really trying to do something good and interesting, and it went wrong. And here's the thing that I would say that's so important. Everybody's beating on Facebook, and I go, they're actually pivoting faster in response to, ooh, we screwed up. They're trying really hard for a company that size. You compare that to fossil fuel companies going, and auto companies, oh, we screwed up. It's like, no, we're in a 50, 60, 70-year denial phase. Tobacco companies, denial phase. Pharma companies, denial phase. It's like, tech, for all that it's screwed up on, is actually way more responsive and going, whoa, we got to really try to fix this. They haven't succeeded yet. But, you know, I look around at these companies, they're all trying.
Yeah, Twitter's making public appearances about it. Yeah.
But it's not just public appearances. They're deeply committed, and they're trying new technological architectures. They're changing their business models. You know,
not yet. Not away from the attention economy.
No, not yet entirely. But they're working at it. You know, and you know, employees are walking out not for better wages, but to actually for a better moral stance about what their company works on. You know, so there's I think if the rest of our society were as responsive, you know, to some of the challenges we face, you know, we'd see Wall Street banks going, whoa. And again, you see people starting to talk about it, you know, where
tech iterates faster than the fossil fuel industry, faster than tobacco, big pharma,
Wall Street. Yeah, and again, I mean, Wall Street is starting to, you know, people are saying, hey, we really have to take this social responsibility seriously. You know, we're screwing up. You know, we are starting to see that move. But I think we have to put it all in this broader context that, yes, the choices we make in our businesses, the choices we make in society could be different.
Yeah,
and
let's talk about that.
And that's really the heart of what I, you know, the big lesson I get from tech is, you know, this is a design system, and a better design can have better outcomes. And we have to learn from what we did wrong as quickly as possible and keep pivoting.
Yes, so let's talk about that code. Yeah. Because this is kind of what, you know, what we're talking about is civilization's code. We're talking about the way that we've designed the way that we engage with each other, that we engage with the products and services that we build, all that kind of stuff. And the conversation that we were having earlier that I want us to circle back to is this big history perspective on society. That we took 200,000 years to get 1 billion people. Then it took 200 years to get 7 billion more people. Then exponential technology has all hockey sticked up at Moore's Law in every single genomic response, in every single way that this is now permeating every field. It's adding these layers of complexity to our world that we didn't prepare for. We're still kind of, our code hasn't caught up. And so now it's up to us to determine what is Capitalism 2.0's code. What is the code of potentially adding regulation to some of the algorithmic bureaucracies that are occurring to make it more equitable? What are the lines of code that need to be added to wealth inequality to make it better for uplifting all humans into the next iteration? So this is what I kind of like to hear your thoughts on, the new code.
All right, well, I guess the first thing I would say is the new code is the old code. You know, in some sense. I think we've always known what our objective ought to be. You know, we've been working on it back since the first legal code that's recorded, the Code of Hammurabi, you know, where we're kind of trying to figure out, what does it mean to be good to each other? What does it mean to be fair?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we're in some sense, we keep, you know, I think sometimes with quotes, I keep thinking of this wonderful line from Wallace Stevens, the poet. He says, we keep coming back and back to the real. You know, we keep coming back and back to this fundamental thing that we are, you know, civilization progresses when we take care of each other. I mean, you know, the primitive, you know, impulse of other is enemy is, you know, something we've been working, you know, through millennia to get better at. And in fact, you know, Yuval Noah Harari does a fabulous job in Sapiens of retelling the history of humanity through the story of what are the mechanisms for trust at greater and greater scale. You know, and it's actually a lot of it is, as he comes back to his storytelling, you know, so how do we create, and of course, this is something I've actually loved for years, because this was my favorite poet, Wallace Stevens, actually talked about that. You know, he had a wonderful idea that we were searching for the supreme fiction, you know, that effectively there were aesthetic visions that shaped, you know, our relationship with each other, and we were trying to sell each other on the future. And so, but Harari really captured it beautifully in that history of humanity. And I think we are now looking for what story will actually help 7 or 8, 9 billion people to survive together.
Yes.
You know, because it's not just our tribe. You know, it's not just, you know, hey,
I have the pieces, as you call it. You call it the jigsaw.
Yeah, it's like a jigsaw puzzle on the table, and we're trying to see the pattern.
I've been trying to figure out how to arrange them into a story that will bind together humanity under the unity.
Well, and I think that the pieces haven't all arrived. But here's what I see that's really powerful. One, we have an economy that's clearly off the rails in a variety of ways. And one is this axis of inequality. But probably an even bigger one is the axis of climate change and the risks that come with that. And we're slowly waking up to that. And we're just going to have to change the way we do things more sustainably. But there's another, so I think about the future as a set of vectors. And a vector, of course, is a direction plus a quantity. Right? And some of the vectors are pushing harder or faster, and some, and they're coming in different directions, but they sum up into the future. And so we're running into the end game of a certain kind of consumer culture, because, as we have, more and more people wanting to have a lifestyle equivalent to what the West has had. We're not just sort of going from a couple of billion people to 9 billion people or whatever that we're going to peak at. We're also going to 9 billion people who all want to use 100 times as many resources. Mm-hmm. So it's as if we had gone to 90 billion. And clearly, there's a lot of things that we go, hey, is this really the best way to do it? That basically our economy should run on making more and more stuff and encouraging people to throw it away.
Nope.
And because companies have to keep growing. Their rule is keep growing and making more money. It's like this machine that's running, faster and faster and faster. And for what? Are we actually happier? If you say, no, we're actually trying to optimize for human happiness, and human happiness is actually maybe, in fact, so anyway, so there's that whole vector.
Yeah,
and then there's this amazing vector, which is that one of the reasons that money took on such a powerful role in our society is it is, in fact, one of those shared mythologies that enables trust.
It's fungible.
It's this powerful way to get people to cooperate. And for a long time, this idea in the market was that effectively price signaling was, in fact, the guiding factor of the invisible hand. People say, well, how much will you pay for this? And depending on how much supply there is, the price, goes down or up. Supply and demand equalize at some magical crossing point that's the market price, and so on. And yet here's starting to be evidence, amazing evidence, that we can run incredibly efficient markets without money. And one of the ones that I like to point people to is Google. And go, wait a minute, Google makes tons of money, right? But if you look at it, their primary market is matching people up with the information they're looking for. And they use hundreds of factors of big data and algorithmic systems and AI to say, oh, this is what you're really looking for. Right? Not one of those factors is money. They separated out money into a separate marketplace of advertising. Which was effectively, for a long time, was really just an absolute sidecar. It literally was a sidebar, down the side.
Yeah.
Now, I think they've really changed that, and I think they've kind of lost the plot, because this was the genius, that they actually had a market that was not dominated by money. This was the breakthrough. And I think Amazon, same thing. Back when I first started talking,
open source style.
Yeah, open source is sort of another example of this. But back when I was first working on Web 2.0 and the idea of collective intelligence, I used to contrast Amazon.com, which at that point was just a bookseller, online bookseller, with Barnes & Noble. And I said, look, here's Barnes & Noble. When I do a search, look what I find. The first thing I find is the stuff that they've gotten people to advertise for. You know, so where I go to Amazon, you know, I used to use my JavaScript book as an example, which was widely regarded. This is the best book on JavaScript, David Flanagan's JavaScript, The Definitive Guide. And it came up first on Amazon. It had the most reviews, had the most positive reviews. It wasn't the cheapest, you know, but it was the one that everybody said, this is the best. And that's what Amazon showed you as the first result for the search.
Ads.
And, you know, Barnes & Noble was like, well, here's some book that some publisher paid us co-op for. And I said, this is why Amazon's going to win. Now, look at how Amazon is losing the plot. The fastest part of their growing part of their business today is their advertising business. And now when you go to Amazon, you no longer see the best product up front. They are trying to promote stuff that advantages them. And so again, part of what I try to do in my book was to kind of talk about some of these principles and say, look, when companies forget these things that actually give them advantage, you know, they tend to lose out over time. And I think we're really, and this is maybe my next book is really about algorithmic monopolies and how they go wrong. Because I think both Google and Amazon are starting to go down the slippery slope of losing what made them great and forgetting that they were actually in service of they were a matching marketplace that really was in service of making the best match. And they moved away from that to being an algorithmic marketplace that makes the match that makes them the most money. So they've kind of, they're losing their place as an exemplar. But that being said, they still show us this ability with massive amounts of data to build better marketplaces and to build better systems that decide who gets what and why. And there's some great examples in the environmental space. Carla Gomez has something called at Cornell has something, I think it's Cornell, something to do, something called the Institute for Computational Sustainability. And they take a lot more factors into account. They work with, you know, she was doing some work with the Brazilian power company. And it's like, okay, let's look at your power requirements, the cost of building dams, you know, on these various tributaries of the Amazon, how many people you're going to displace, what the ecological impact. Let's take more factors into account. Right. And they end up, just like Google, using these 200 factors, were able to make better recommendations than the old things that said, well, just show them whatever people are willing to pay the highest price for. Correct, right?
Taking all of the nuance.
They take all the factors into account. They were actually getting better economic results as well.
Totally.
Same thing, she did another project, or people that she was associated with did a project where they were timing the release of water for the California rice farmers to the time when the migrating birds were coming through. It worked out better for both the farmers because they eat the pests. And, you know, so there's all these cool pieces of work where I think we are now for the first time building tools that allow us to actually invent a new economy. And it's not that it's capitalism 2.0. It's something profoundly different. It's simply a different way of organizing.
The code of civilization.
The code of civilization.
Yeah, yeah. Right. So I think whatever we end up calling it, whatever it ends up being, I like thinking about it as an update in code, as now we've been referencing several times. And throughout what we've, you know, your segment of what you just unpacked, what continues to come to mind is where we agree on our making this new map, this new way to help people see the world. Right. And I think one of the central principles of it is when society evolves so quickly and you just see populations just skyrocket and exponential technology skyrocket, and institutions and humans aren't able to keep up the way that they're valued in the labor markets and everything, that you just see so many oops moments happen at once. And when we walk down our beautiful city of San Francisco and we see such a staggering dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots right on our primary street, Market Street, that you see that this is about the seeds, the rotten seeds that haven't gotten the nutrients they need because the social fabric wasn't programmed to help make sure that those nutrients didn't have trauma, that they had the loving, caring mother and father in their family and their upbringing, that they had the food and water and shelter and necessities that they needed to have it, that we went up so fast, our social fabric wasn't able to make sure that the seeds didn't have
Yeah.
that they didn't get rotten and that they had the right nutrients. And so this is kind of this reoccurring theme, is that when you have this blitz scaling model, this model of the hare versus the model of the tortoise, the slow down and think. Maybe we have 100 million humans on the planet, and we decide that 1,000 years ago that we slow down and we think. How do we make sure that every single one of these minds gets to their maximal creative flourishing? That we build trust in the way geopolitically, that we build trust and we cooperate so that we don't have the tens of millions of people that die in wars, 100 million plus
Alan,
people.
I don't understand why you don't acknowledge that these people that are in trauma, these people that are set up to be in compromising situations, all the problems that we have among us, I don't understand why you don't acknowledge that that's also part of the capitalistic system. You know, in order to, if you have private prisons, you need to create the criminal. I just want you to acknowledge that, Alan. You know, you talk like, you know, we have to fix something. It's not broke. There's a reason for that.
Right.
I just want to throw that out there. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right.
So now, Ron, you're indicating what the current system exists today and how it's structured, and that is correct. At the same time, we're discussing what, looking back and thinking about how to act as a tortoise and slow down and think as society evolves, can prevent things like that from happening. And that is one of the reasons the show's called Simulation, is because you have to be able to think abstractly about how society could have evolved to be a more beautiful place that enabled all of these seeds to flourish at their fullest potential.
Yeah, I guess I would just say we can only live life forwards, and so we have to go forward from where we are. And I guess
the thought experiment's important.
Yeah, no, I hear that. But let me just say a couple things. One, I think, first of all, we have to be able to think in scenarios and possibilities. Thought experiments is exactly right. So I want to give you two. And one is John Maynard Keynes' Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren, written really at the, as the Great Depression was unfolding, where he said this is a temporary hiccup. We have the means, through, human ingenuity to make everybody prosperous, right? And that is, in fact, I think, is in the realm of possibility. And there are things that we need to debug in our system that are causing that not to work. But I also think that there is, and that often gets paired with this idea that somehow we have to slow down, that we have to have a very different kind of society. And I think that may not be necessary.
Totally.
The Back to the Land, I mean, one of my all-time favorite books is a utopian novel that was written in the 30s called Islandia. And it's about a land with a slower lifestyle. And I've lived in the country. I have a lot of friends who've kind of, went back to the land during the, the 70s and so on. So
maybe just a closer connection to Earth.
But yeah, maybe. But I also just want to hold out something else, and that's something that Jeff Bezos said recently, which I really thought was good. And I argue with my sort of more hippie friends about it, which is he was defending why he thinks we need to invest in space. And he said, I want humanity to continue being an energy-intensive civilization, or to have an energy-intensive civilization. So it's not that we necessarily have to slow down. The goal of equity and fairness does not have to go with, whoa, we have to have fewer people, we have to have...
Totally.
Yeah,
totally. You can have tens of billions of people.
Yeah, the issue is, like, if we said, okay, we have a bunch of conditions to satisfy, and some countries are doing a better job of it than others. You look at, for example, how China has brought way more people into, when everybody says, oh, the world has, gotten wealthier. I go, that's a lot, it's not the result of market capitalism, purely. It's also a bunch of very aggressive, very strong intervention in one very large economy, where they have actually done a lot of very effective planning and that planning has been driven by the goal. They're afraid that if they don't make a better life for their people, they're screwed. So they have been on a quest for how do we make this better for people, and we kind of look down on a lot about China from our our great system, and our system has lost the plot when it was the land of opportunity for people, and it's no longer. We've kind of changed the DNA of America, and I think that the issue. So I guess the issue is less slowing down and more like, are we satisfying the goals of our best selves to basically lift everybody up? And that's not to say, oh, everybody should be equal and get the same outcomes. Totally. But there has to be opportunity, and there has to be, I really like Anand Giridharadas' book, Winners Take All, where and the basic message that he has. I mean, he's created a lot of waves with it, and maybe sometimes being a little over-aggressive. But this fundamental idea is like, it's not enough to say, well, we have this great system that's made us really rich, and I will give something back. He's like, no, do less harm. It's like, and so one of the fundamental market failures in our current system is that we have a whole bunch of externalities that we never take into account, which is why I keep coming back to this ability of algorithmic, big data, AI systems to take more factors into account. Yeah. Because our current system, again, maybe if we had a true market economy, as opposed to one where, market power means that the people who are in power keep giving themselves more and more of the pie. But if we had a system where we were really saying, no, we really are trying to take into account as many factors as possible to get the right answer, we'd be going, homelessness, clearly a problem. Oh, well, what are some of the problems? We're not building enough houses. Why are we not building enough houses? Because the people who already have them and have the money don't want more houses.
Can I give you some ideas?
Yeah.
Let's give some,
one of my great lines
ideas. Okay, here's some ideas to the code.
Okay.
Okay? Because the notion that we're moving too fast is simultaneously potentially true. It needs to be paired maybe with a little bit of the...
That we're not moving fast enough in other areas.
Sure. Yeah.
We're lopsided.
Okay,
yes. Market design.
So we may, if we take the time to slow down, connect to our hearts, connect to other humans, connect to Earth, connect to the unity that we are here so blessed to have 100 billion humans build the civilization before us, and slow down to that mentality and be with that. Then pick up on the areas that need more acceleration, potentially rewrite some of the code that needs to be augmented to be more of that unity mindset, let's say, that kind of stuff. I want to give you these examples. Let's hear what Tim O'Reilly's thoughts are about these examples. Okay, we have people like Lorenzo de' Medici from 1500s in Florence that patroned Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and enabled the renaissance of art to occur. We have things like conspicuous consumption that's roaring out of control, where people are purchasing status symbols of diamonds and Ferraris and seventh houses and yachts and jets and everything, because conspicuous consumption culture has become out of control. And the notion that the social fabric isn't able to correct itself on time, to understand that me becoming like Medici and actually going and patroning, instead of buying the seventh house, that I can go and give 10, 20, 50 entrepreneurs and artists $1,000 a month for them to unleash their creative flourishing more. We haven't changed the culture fully to that.
Well, I guess my thought on that was, first of all, Lorenzo de' Medici did a lot of harm in accumulating his power. And yes, he was patron of wonderful art. So in fact, you look at you have to have both of these perspectives, and we kind of have to equalize. All of the world's sort of great works of art were funded through inequality. So there's something about inequality that clearly, creates things of lasting value. It's when it gets too much, right? And it's also not just too much when it's, I guess the thing that I would say is, I think the real opportunity before us is not to have lots and lots of people become patrons. I think the opportunity before us is to do without money. That's the real end game.
Is this a decentralization push?
No, it really is. Can we find other ways to manage markets that are looking to optimize human flourishing? And there's a lot of sort of hacks that are bit by bit getting us there.
Illustrate some model for us.
Well, okay. Let's talk about the caring economy, right? There is an argument to be made that many innovations actually start with rich people. Hal Varian likes to say, if you want to see the future, just look at what rich people do today. If in fact technology is making us richer. I mean, this is not to take away from my fundamental, deep, passionate belief that we have a deep flaw in our algorithms for allocation of who gets what and why, and we need to improve them. But we are basically creating the future for rich people. What do the rich people have? They have, their kids are in school with very small class sizes. They have super good health care, right? They have the ability to enjoy the good things of life. They have potentially lots of leisure. They now have things like when they have a kid and they have a job, they get super extended parental leave. Oh wait, we're effectively, for rich people, we're funding the caring economy, right? The company goes, oh yeah, sure, Mark Zuckerberg, you're CEO, but you can take 3 months off.
Time to contemplate their self-actualization.
Right. And so the question is, how do we bring that down so that everyone gets the stuff that the rich people get?
Okay,
and that's sort of an
How do we?
Well, I think
it's like the baseline keeps going up faster.
I love Kai-Fu Lee, who's the author of AI Superpowers, has a great riff in his book about this, and it's a version of the robot tax idea. Mm-hmm. He's like, and I kind of say, let the machines do all the work. Like great, let humans do the human things. Spending time. I mean, you and I are doing this. This thing, we're having this conversation. That's a human thing. Mm-hmm. Machines can't take that. I couldn't give you a robot to have this conversation with you on my behalf.
Not yet.
Well, at that point, they're people, and that's a whole other thing. But yeah, there's all caretaking, education, all these wonderful things that we all enjoy and are precious to us. We need more time for, and how do we make that available to everyone? But anyway, his idea of he calls it the social investment stipend. He says, you tax the robots, yes, automate away everything. And then you tax the robots and you use it to fund human-centered activities. And you do it through hacks like saying, oh yeah, we have this generous child care program. Oh, we have this generous elder care program. Oh, we actually give people a stipend when they do community work.
Let's talk about
when they
the
work
code.
for nonprofits.
How does the tax on robot work become implemented into human flourishing?
Oh, well, again, at some point, some country will put in place a policy like this. This is not like, you look at what happened. We didn't used to have an income tax, and then we did. We didn't used to have Social Security, and then we did. I'm just talking about the US here. Mm-hmm. We didn't used to have Medicare, and then we did. Somebody basically says, oh, here's a revenue source that we will use to fund this redistribution. It's a market design issue. Again, the tax system is the primary sort of operating system in many ways of a society.
So that's not viewed as a basic income, though. That is
no. I think the basic income. I mean, there's a lot.
You're right about it, but
no. I think that there's certainly it's an attractive idea, but I'm not sure it's right.
It seems like a Band-Aid in some ways.
Yeah, it seems like a Band-Aid. I do think that the way we're more likely to get there, I mean, because there's a lot that really works about the market economy.
But how is the robot tax not quite like that?
Well, it's just how do you use it? If you basically, you say, okay, we're gonna automate things, and then we're gonna tax the robots, and then we're going to use it for basic income, you know, maybe we don't get there. You know, I think that there is something that says we want to use, again, a lot of what we've taxed ourselves for in the past are things that are around this human fabric, you know, education. You know, I mean, that's one of the really heartening stories that I kind of go back and bring into history in our books. You know, why did we get universal primary education in America, universal high school? You know, it was actually through people going, wow, we need to tax ourselves so our kids will have a better future. And I love Bob Putnam, the author of Bowling Alone and other books, who said in this meeting I was in once, he said, you know, he said, all the advances in our society have come when we have taxed ourselves to help other people's children. And I think that willingness to say, we're going to give something up in order to make a fairer society. And we're going to write rules for our economy, for our algorithmic system. We're going to write rules where the fundamental outcome we are looking for is human flourishing. And here are things that are currently underserved. And I guess I would just say that I think that you know, I foresee a future, and this is where I kind of come back just by analogy to these two markets that make up Google, the market without money and the market with money. And you can imagine a robot world with money where the robots are transacting around money, and that they're supporting a human world without money. In the same way that Google search is like, hey, you don't want the thing that somebody's trying to sell you. You want the thing that you know, we've been able to determine is the thing I'm really looking for, the best answer, you know, the thing that's really going to delight me. And so we have this beginning, this sort of hint at this, you know, kind of Star Trek future, or you know, Ian Banks' culture novels, where there's just like people are supported by the machines in human activity.
With a high tax that enables the caring economy.
Yeah, that's right. Occur. That's right. That effectively you tax the machines. You know, you're not saying really that you tax the machines. The machines are just doing the work. Which
is this the right code?
I think we can get there. We'll get there. You know, mostly things get there through hacks. Although periodically there's a chance to rewrite the code more profoundly. You know, you saw that with the American Revolution. You saw that with, you know, the New Deal. You saw that with you know, the Great Society. You know, I don't know. I think we've lost. You're seeing it right now in China in a very profound way. Where they're writing a whole new set of rules, and I do think that there's a good argument to be made that for all the things that they're going to get wrong, you know, China is way more further ahead of us in saying, how do we use all of the gifts of technology to build a society that takes the best of capitalism, but also recognizes that if we don't create opportunity for our people, we're screwed. And you know, they've moved faster than we have on things like climate change. You know, just all these things that if you had predicted that, you know, 20 years ago, you would have been a real prophet.
All of this conversation about how to best update civilization's code moving forward, why it's up to us, and figuring out, you know, who's going to own what, why, and could it potentially be a way to make the code work for all 8 billion of us to understand. The more that we invest into raising the baseline, the more there will be creative flourishing, the more there will be overall the objective function.
I think that's right.
Humanity will
there's a word I want to pick out of what you said. Who's going to own what? Because that's why I love Al Roth's title. It's like, who gets what and why? And his study was of markets without money. You don't. And this really comes up. I was thinking about this because of a wonderful essay that Sam Lessin just wrote in The Information. I don't know if you're familiar with that publication, but he wrote about the idea of people owning their data. And he was like, worry about what you ask for, because you're taking a concept from a world where of exclusivity. You know, if I give you this thing, I no longer have it.
Totally.
And whereas with ideas, I give it to you, we both have it. The value, there's different rules. You know, if everybody has it, it becomes valueless at some point, not depending on, but anyway, there's different rules for things and for these ideas and this creative economy and so on. And so the question really it may not have to do with ownership. Ownership may not be the point. If we live in a world...
Just who gets what
right,
and why.
Yeah, if we live in a world where, you know, it's much more around experiences, for example, you know, it's like, hey, what experiences do you have access to?
Do you have access to a myriad of experiences that everybody else has access to, and then you get to pick which ones you want to do? And can we democratize experiences to that degree? Could that be the new baseline for everyone around the world?
I think one of the things that I see in looking at technology is, first of all, we're very, very bad at imagining the future. When we talk about a future like this, we start out by framing it, you know, like we have these big blinders and it's sort of the market stuff, money, economy.
You know,
right. And we're just going to tweak it a little bit. I use the example,
That's usually right.
you know, in my book and in some of my talks of the. I you know, talk quite a bit about the evolution of the ride share.
This is so important.
The evolution of the ride sharing market, right? You know, you think about. First off, somebody saw it. Sunil Paul filed a patent in 2000, right? You know, so that covered most of what later became Uber and Lyft and all the like.
Yeah.
But you know, even though in 2000, like 2005, out come the first, you know, internet-enabled taxi cabs. What do they have? They have a little screen in the back showing ads and a credit card reader. That was your internet-connected taxi cab. You know, and then even then. And then Taxi Magic comes along in 2007, and they're kind of trying to work within the confines of the taxi industry, you know. And the taxi, it didn't really work because the taxi drivers would go, well, shit, you know, I got this web call to go to somebody's house, but hey, there's a passenger right here.
Totally.
I'll pick him up now.
Yeah.
You know, there were all the incentives were all wrong, and bit by bit, the model evolved. All the more pieces got thrown on the table. There were smartphones with GPS. You know, people invented little bits of the answer, and then that model evolved. And I think we're in that same process of kind of groping our way towards a future that could be very, very different. And the three things I think about when people say, you know, this was, you know, I wrote my book in the period when everybody was like, oh, the robots are going to take all the jobs. And I had three answers. I said, one, there's so much shit to do that we're not getting to, that we need all the help from robots that we can get. You know, and a good example of that in our, you know, in the work we do at Code for America was, for example, automatic records clearance. You know, everybody was like, well, we can't really do that. It's too expensive. You know, this is like for people who, like, okay, you used to have a marijuana conviction. We just made marijuana legal. Can we get it off your record? Well, no, it's too expensive. You know, you have to apply. You have to get a lawyer. You know, it's trying to pawn the cost off on the person who is suffering. Instead, you know, but we're like, hey, we can just write a robot, you know, a software program that can download all the records, look at them, evaluate them, and say these are the people who are eligible. Here's the paperwork, you know, and we could even get rid of that paperwork if we had a little bit more integration. You know, it's like, here's a robot doing a job that was not getting done.
Yes.
And I go, there's so many things like that.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, could we use robots to actually make life better, cheaper? Yes.
Just retraining the bottom half of you know, 50-year-old truck drivers. And,
that's right.
Yeah. To do that is
right. And then the second thing, of course, is you know, this whole caring economy question. It's like, if we could figure out a way for people to be rewarded for doing things that are human. You know, again,
child care, elder care, massages,
you know, the social fabric,
volunteers,
all those things that are
getting rewarded
for
that.
You know,
in the caring economy.
And then of course the creative economy. You know, where we are doing things for each other more and more. That we if we have the leisure time, what do we do with it? So there's all these reasons why I think we have a lot of pieces where we could imagine an economy that's built on very different lines. And I think bit by bit, people are working their way towards it.
And this is why this whole notion of running the simulation, running the updates in code. What does it look like when you press play, when you run the updates in code? Could the creative and the caring economies figure out a way to work with some sort of an incentive system to get people to want to actually go and transition? How would the robotic tax interplay with that?
Yeah, I don't know that it's, I mean, it's a mix of, you know, part of it is it's already happening. You know, just think about it for a minute. We already have this huge attention economy that people are working at, in some sense, right? You know, Google, the web, which Google then aggregated, you know, with the search engine, people creating this content. And yes, there's a market economy for that where people are saying, hey, I'm gonna be able to monetize this via ads. But there's huge amounts of content that were just like produced because people are creative. You know, people putting things on YouTube, you know, because they love to create, they love to share. And then, you know, again, you overlay the market economy that gets more going. Facebook, people, I mean, how many hours would it take to create Facebook? I mean, that's a massive amount of human labor, right? But it's turned into play. And so we already are building a lot of a very different economy on which people spend their time. And you know, we just haven't really caught up with it in the way we think, and we also haven't caught up with it in the way that we you know, we incent businesses, because we're still, you know, like if you said the job, you know, like if you think about if Facebook were there to optimize human flourishing.
Let's think about how the code would be operating.
Well, one of the things that would be missing was they would not be subject to the master algorithm, as I describe it in my book, which says you must always make more money than you made the year before.
Yeah, that's the master algorithm.
That is the master algorithm of our society. So because, you know, fact is, you know, you could, you know, everybody's like, well, without the market incentive, you know, you wouldn't have, and they go, that's not true. You know, people are making obscene amounts of money today for things that people were quite motivated by making a tiny fraction of that before, right? And so I guess the idea that, so I guess that's the main thing I would just say is that we've gotten ourselves way out of scale in the way that we think about how much people need to be rewarded. And again, it's a basic...
Ronnie, do you want to wrap?
We told him we were only going for an hour.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, let's wrap.
Okay.
Yeah, but...
Okay. Okay, then if we're gonna wrap, then I have some questions.
Okay, well, let's do that. We can do the rest of the questions. But you know, my fundamental belief is that we could be building like a society that we would really like to live in. We have the capability. And the thing that most makes us go wrong is this idea that the market must be satisfied. And the market pretty much means stock price keeps going up. And it's just the wrong objective function. Yeah. It's the wrong objective function. You know, like
human flourishing is the right objective.
Human flourishing is the right objective. And could you imagine a Facebook that said, no, we're really, you know, we need, you know, like the way I always said is like money is like gas in the car. You don't want to run out, but you're not doing a tour of gas stations. If Facebook were able to live by that philosophy, you go, oh yeah, we actually, you know, we're making billions already. Why do we need to make more billions, remind me? No, it's way better for us to make sure that we don't have a massacre in Myanmar on our platform. It's way better for us if people have trust in their government. Oh, it's way better for us if people really are getting engagement. And yes, we would trade that off against squeezing more profit out of this.
Let's think, this is for another episode, but just the ways that that would happen is the pay cuts in half because the people would be finding more meaning, the less amount of employees, the more amount of focus on switching up the business model away from the attention economy. There's so many pieces that would have to be willing to transition.
I'm not sure that we have to transition away from the attention economy. You can actually think about a very positive version of the attention economy.
Sure, a positive version of it.
And I think you can also think about reducing working hours. Reducing the incredible skew between top and bottom in the way people get paid. Silicon Valley is great in that it has this egalitarian stock option system, but incredibly rotten in the way that it's skewed so heavily to the top.
So the amount of options of how to execute this for objective function of human flourishing are endless, and we got to run more tests. Run more tests. Okay, the couple quick questions on the way out. In the long term perspective here, it seems like the one that owns the substrate monopolizes the substrate and get to control the way that we enter and interplay with the substrate. That is one of the reasons why the Google. That is one of the reasons why the Tencent. This is why the reasons why these organizations want to be the ones that control the entry point of us into the world. Do you see this as a central issue?
Well, I think everybody who wants to think about that should read Tim Wu's book, The Master Switch, which is basically a history of monopoly in America mostly. But he starts out with the Bell system, telephony as monopoly, movies, and the cycle where you have this this path from scrappy entrepreneurial economy, often with people who are inventing the future, which gets consolidation. I kind of talk about this in my book. I hadn't read Tim's book at the time, but it's a wonderful historical view of how the cycle repeats in industry after industry. And I think there is a place where you do get to a point where a regulated monopoly may in fact be the right answer. But certainly you get to the point where there are trade-offs that have to be made where a company that's in a position of great power that is also believes that its only objective is to make more money is a very unstable, very dangerous situation. So either companies have to self-regulate away from that position, or they have to, basically the people need to step up and regulate them. The problem, of course, is that we have a fairly dysfunctional government that doesn't really, on both right and left, that is kind of dogmatic about this and not scientific about this question of how are we going to achieve these best results.
This question is, I think, again, a very long, so many options about how to best run the code. 2 questions. The show's called Simulation. Is this a simulation?
I guess I would say if it is, it shouldn't really matter to us because it's convincing enough that we have to act as if it's real. And I guess I've always believed that our agency, even if it's a fiction, is the most important thing we have.
And how to maximize flourishing with that agency across the world. And last question is, what's the most beautiful thing in the world?
If I have to, what came into my head was there's a particular age when your baby is old enough to put its arms around your neck. They can actually, and they, still like this visceral memory of my 2 daughters at an age, it's sort of maybe year and change, where they are like still totally in this blissed out, they can be in this blissed out, like total trust of you space, and they put their arms around you, and there's nothing like it in this world.
Very beautiful, Tim. Ooh, what a crazily wide-ranging episode that has left me in a bunch of different new areas of thinking. And I hope that for those that have been watching, likewise, hopefully we can continue thinking about how to best update the code and continue running these experiments for maximizing flourishing. Tim O'Reilly.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming onto the show. It's been
You're
such an
welcome.
honor and pleasure. I would love for everyone watching to give us your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you about the things that we talked about. Start having these conversations more in your communities, with your friends, your families, online. Really start thinking about how to maximize human flourishing. What is the way that we want to write the code? Check out Tim's book, What's the Future and Why It's Up to Us. The link's in the bio. Also check out O'Reilly Media. Check out the platform. It's got so much great educational information and resources on it. It also has so many conference listings on it. The amount of conferences you guys do is just mind-blowing how you guys do that. Check all of that out below. Follow Tim on Twitter, follow him on Medium. He's got so many great posts there. And support the artists and entrepreneurs that you believe in. All our links are below. We would love for you guys to join and support us so we can continue impacting more people around the world. Huge shout out to Ron Vargas, our producer and director. Thank you very much. We appreciate you greatly. And go and build the future, everyone. Manifest your dreams into the world. We love you so much, and we will see you soon. Peace.